Don't you think it's time for the city of Savannah to have an honest tourism management plan? That SCAD start paying its fair share? And the hospitality industry needs to increase its wages? The impacts of new growth should not cost residents. All local elected officials on council and commission should have term limits. We're working hard to accomplish these policies. We need your help. Please contribute whatever you can, $5, $10, or $20, by going to bettersavannah.org. Donate. Thank you.
I appreciate our tourism community. I appreciate our hoteliers.
With our community partners who currently don't pay property taxes to share in the continued vitality of our city by making payments in lieu of taxes. Stay tuned about the outcome of those discussions.
The following show and broadcast is a production of Better Savannah, an independent expenditure committee dedicated to better policy outcomes at the state and local level. The views, opinions, and statements made by the hosts and/or their guests do not necessarily reflect the views of Better Savannah.
John, good afternoon, good evening.
Chuck, how are you, my friend?
I told you I'm a little under the weather, so I'll probably be mostly producing this episode. But I want to welcome everybody into the live broadcast of Better Savannah, episode number 69. John, the concept of pilot. Earlier this week, our page published our editorial, mostly your words. I know I helped you a little bit with it. It clearly struck a chord. By now, this post has been viewed probably almost 17,000 times in our area. A lot of comments, an ungodly amount of shares, just a lot of activity on it.
A lot of energy.
A lot of energy.
Yep.
And I played this clip, and I'm going to play it one more time here. This was at the very end of Mayor Van Johnson's State of the City speech about 2 weeks ago.
With our community partners who currently don't pay property taxes to share in the continued vitality of our city by making payments in lieu of taxes. stay tuned about the outcome of those discussions.
So here we are tonight, John, to have a discussion. We're still waiting on a few of our panelists to arrive. I know it's a very busy season for elected officials right before the holidays here. But why don't you let me know where you want to start, and then we'll bring in Dr. Bringman from the school board and hopefully our other two panelists shortly.
Okay. For those who have followed our travels and our issues, and for those that haven't, Better Savannah has lobbied, advocated, and tried to champion fairness in policy in our communities. And one of the things that we have consistently touched on is the idea of pilot fees, that is payment in lieu of taxes from various entities within our community. SCAD being one of them, the Port of Savannah being another. Now, for those that are not my age, which is most everyone, the port used to pay the county, I believe it was $1.50 per container. This is in the late 80s up until the early 90s, and that money was paid to the county, and then the county carved out funds for Garden City, Bloomingdale, Port Wentworth, the other communities that had port activity directly. And for the longest time, Garden City didn't need to have a millage rate or property taxes because they were being funded from these container fees. Of course, that ended. It was never brought back, and here we are. With major impacts in our community from the port, and nothing directly to show for it. Anyway, I point that out, that this is not exclusively about the Savannah College of Art and Design. They're a neighbor, a friend, and a longstanding part of the community, as is the port. So those are two mammoth institutions that we would like to see become a little better community partners. You saw the mayor address them as community partners, and that is exactly what they are. So we're not plowing fields that have not been plowed before. We just would like to, have more fertility and more results from it. And if you look at the growth of SCAD, the post that we did 2 days ago that's gotten the 17,000 views or reach. SCAD started in 1978 with 71 students, and you frequently, Chuck, say that it was entirely reasonable for them to have a boost to get started, and the benefits of reduced rates or no taxes probably made sense, certainly for the first decade, into the 80s and maybe into the 90s. And then the book came out and the movie, and, we were off to the races. And at this point, SCAD owns over 110 key properties in the community for which they are not charged any property taxes. Yet their 14,000 students require service, be it ambulance, police, fire, courts, health, parks and recreation. So they're kind of it's time, I think, and I think the mayor agrees with us, Chuck, that it's time now to put some sort of stopgap measure in place that levels the playing field and makes them a real and valued community partner. So
let me just stop you and just reset real quick, okay? Because I want to let you know that someone submitted a copyright claim during our live broadcast on Facebook, which I think is hilarious. Clearly, someone does not want this episode to go out. I just hit the dispute forum because obviously, shouts out to the Trainwrecks, local band out of Tybee Island. Support them. They've given us free use of Song for Sally, which is kind of our show's theme song. So I just posted on the Facebook page the link to the YouTube video stream as well, and I see some people populating over there now. So I just want to welcome everybody in, both who's watching this live on Facebook or YouTube, and those who will view the replay tomorrow, or if you're listening to this on one of your podcast apps as well. So just wanted to reset that real quick, John, because I saw that notification came through.
Is that a music copyright?
I mean, it would have to be, right?
Yeah.
You know, it would have to be. So I guess kind of misses that Adot is trying to get in. So, you know, we'll get there soon enough.
Okay. Well, so to kind of speed this up, we put together a hypothetical pilot program that we think makes sense. And we're here tonight as a roundtable, open-ended, conceptual discussion about what would make a great, equitable pilot program. And we're going to preview the details of that. And our guests, as you know, elected officials and policymakers in our community, will hopefully be able to make some general comments, if nothing else, about the concept. So, hey,
Commissioner Aaron Whiteley from the 6th District and School Board member David Bringman, also from the 6th District. Just want to welcome you guys in to our episode today. John, I'm going to be in the background, so just holler at me when you want something on the screen from one of the layouts, okay?
Okay, I'll do it. Hey, Commissioner, how are you?
I'm great. Thank you for having me. It seems like the South Side is well represented today.
Indeed, the 6th District is there in strength.
Absolutely.
Evening, Adot. Good to see you.
Good evening, brother. How you doing, Dr. Bringman?
Good. Glad you're here.
Commissioner Whiteley, were you able to get the one sheet overview of the plan, the conceptual pilot plan that we hammered out?
Yeah, I'm pulling it up now. Yeah, there we go.
Okay, yeah, Chuck's got it up on the screen for us. I guess there's no place better to start than with the details of the plan. I'll tell you that before we get into those nuts and bolts, based on county assessor records, SCAD has over $300 million of property situated inside the city of Savannah for which they don't pay any property taxes on. And I'll tell you from a long history of Board of Assessor policy watching and working that that $300 million figure is incredibly low, because the reality is, since they don't pay taxes, they don't spend a lot of time keeping them properly valued. It's just a question of the work hours that are available with a limited staff, and we think the tax assessor's office is doing a great job. Terry Tolbert, heading up the Board of Assessors, has done a great job. But it's only natural that an organization with a staff of 24, 25 to keep track of 60 or 70,000 parcels just in the city alone is an arduous task. So they tend to just let the SCAD values and other tax exempt values languish, and then they'll get them caught up at a later date. Anyway, if SCAD was paying like all of us pay for county, city, and schools, they would be paying close to $6 million a year in property taxes, even at the reduced non-attentive values that they currently enjoy because they're tax exempt and we don't watch them. So what we call for here is SCAD would add a quarterly fee of $67 to all SCAD students' bills. And this would either be paid by the student or paid by the school. It doesn't matter to us at this point. That is based on a student population, according to their figures, of 12,848 students. They've got another 1,500 online students, but they could be anywhere, so you can't count them. So we're going with real students, their numbers. That would create, excuse me, an estimated total tax or fee, pilot fee payment of $2.5 million. Chuck, if you scroll back up, that is 74 cents a day for an additional cost to the students. It's a very reasonable, tiny amount. Okay, go ahead and scroll up, Chuck, and we'll cover the other details of it. Just as a comparison to their annual tuition of $37,000, this would be a 0.005% additional cost, negligible. I mean, in my parking app for the city of Savannah, when I put $1 on a meter, there's a 5-cent charge for convenience levied. Okay, the revenue sharing formula that we're just suggesting, open jump ball here, 42% might go to the Chatham County school system, which would be $1 million a year. 29% would go to Chatham County, Aaron. That would be $750,000 of recurring revenue. And the city of Savannah likewise would get $750,000 a year in recurring revenue. Let's take a look at what other nonprofit universities are doing. Chuck, do you have the slide for, there we go. Now this is old information from, I don't know, 2012.
2013 is when this was published.
Okay. You can see that the pilot fees concept is not unique, and it is longstanding. Harvard gives Boston, Cambridge $10 million a year. Yale University gives New Haven, Connecticut $8 million a year. Stanford University out in California, where I'm going on Sunday, pays $7 million a year, et cetera, et cetera. Even the Mass, I guess that's Massachusetts General Hospital, which is not an educational facility per se, but a hospital who doesn't pay any property taxes, gives the community $3.5 million a year for Boston. Anyway, I guess we're trying to build a case here and get into some discussion with you. I apologize for the long-winded monologue, but this is a complicated and important subject. So what do you guys think about pilot fees in general? Let's start with David. What's your take on them?
Yeah, it's nice that it's not something new. So this shouldn't come as a shock to anybody out there that lots of communities across our country are looking at non-for-profit establishments and asking them to offset some of the burden that they place on the community that they're in. And the figures that you're putting out here have already taken into account that SCAD does provide some benefit to Savannah, because you're already saying that, this is less money than what would be 1% of a basic property tax. I think this is a good starting point, a place to have a conversation with SCAD, but then to allow SCAD to maybe be a trendsetter in this so that other non-for-profits in our community also decide to better the community that they're in. I can definitely see that the money that would come from this would be an infusion into our general fund and would make it really easy to change the lives of students via hiring more counselors, so that our counselor to student ratio is lower, or just going into the general fund and being a portion of merit increase across the table for all of our
Teacher
staff and faculty.
salaries?
Yeah.
Teacher salaries?
Yep.
Yeah. Great.
Dr. Bringman, could you detail how much a merit salary increase is for the school
so
system?
our last year's merit salary increase, which I was very pleased that we were able to do, came in a little over 2%, and that's $6.5 million. So I know the numbers always are really hard to swallow when you look at our budget, but over 85% of our budget is just salaries.
Sure.
So when you do a merit increase of any percent, it gets very, very large very quickly. So any infusion from an outside source is going to make that easier, or make it to where you can give more.
Thank you, David. Thank you. Aaron, general
Yes,
view,
sir.
pilot fees. Time has come,
Yeah, so-
or too soon? What's the deal?
Yeah, so well, first let me start by saying just as it relates to Chatham County, the county has not taken an official stance at any point, so I don't want my comments to be misconstrued as the county stance. This is my input for the sake of discussion, and I think it's definitely a valid conversation.
We hear you.
And so, yeah, I agree with Dr. Bringman. When we look at the impact that the students at SCAD have on our community, a lot of positive impact, don't get me wrong. But when we think about services, when I'm thinking of things from a infrastructure perspective, road usage, police usage in some way or another, our services are used in some way or another, whether it be county or city. I do think that it is a good there is some sort of need for the entity that has grown so large and has such a wide footprint throughout our community to be able to contribute in other ways. And that being said, I've had a couple of conversations about SCAD and their impact on the community. And I do know that generally speaking, their stance is they do provide a positive impact. And I think that's fair to say. I've hired SCAD students and worked with SCAD students. The faculty work and serve on boards and so on and so forth. But again, when we get down to the bottom line of it, growth and development, maintenance of our infrastructure, that comes on the back of our citizens. And when you are able to expand to such a vast footprint without necessarily helping our overall bottom line, as it relates to county government, school board, city government, then I do think it is time to have a conversation. Now, I will ask you, John, for your historical input, or as to, has there been any discussions with SCAD in the past about this?
No, Aaron, 20 years ago, when I sat on the county commission, no. The short answer is no. I will submit to you, though, that in the last 20 years, SCAD has probably tripled its holdings and its student body. In 2002, they'd only been up and running for 15 years. The population today and the acquisition, we're going to get into the effects of their footprint that you very notably called out, because there are some additional effects beyond just the loss of revenue. Lastly and secondly, Aaron, Dr. Billy Hare, chairman of the county commission at the time, on subjects like this, he would always say, every building and parcel in the city of Savannah is in the county. We tend to lose sight of that and think in these silos. Mm-hmm. And that's one thing Better Savannah, in bringing this show tonight and continuing our dialogue, is we think the idea is time has come, but we don't think it should be just a City of Savannah initiative. We think we'd have better results if all local government, city, county, and schools were at the table and discussing this important subject. So.
Yeah, I agree with you on that, and not to deflect or to defer. I do agree that The county does need to be a part of that conversation. I really think that the county should be involved in a lot of conversations that have been had in silos. I think that kind of is why we are in some of the situations we are now, because we're all operating in silos, and maybe there's some ways we can operate more efficiently when we work together. So that comment was brought to you by the One Chatham.
Chuck, you're reading my mind. Let me just pose a general question, because I think it's important. Is public opinion in favor of a pilot program for SCAD? And in the past, when this was made, 36 hours of posting of the rather long conceptual article, almost 12,000 people had
all organic
had consumed, read the proposition.
It's over 16,000 now.
Correct. So we were dumbstruck at how this took off, and I think it's evidence, particularly if you go in and look at the comments, and we're going to show a few of the comments in a minute, but Chuck, I think the comments were 80% positive, maybe even 85%.
At least.
And I'm happy to discuss even the negative critiques of the thing, because they're certainly out there, and they have value, and we'll take a look at them as well. Matter of fact, let's go to slide 4, Chuck. This is one of the 4 or 5 people. This is a direct quote from a poster. SCAD has saved many historic properties. Chuck put up 5, and this was a response to that, which I thought was incredibly adroit. Building preservation is not more important than the people displaced by SCAD dorms and such. It's not more important than the people who can no longer afford to live in their very neighborhoods and who are forced to move further away. This, my friends, is the other dimension of gentrification. And we have seen, whether it's the 4 or 5 blocks of West Victory Drive where SCAD has now clustered dorms and buildings, or along Abercorn Street with the purchase of Chatham Apartments and the John Marshall Law School and that collection, they seem to be concentrating their facilities. And whether they're satellited, 5-10 blocks away, or they're all side by side, it has an effect on property values. And if you own property, your value is going to go through the roof, and that's the market force at work. Unfortunately, as that contributor to the page pointed out, that doesn't solve the problem of the displacement and the cultural shift that occurs in a community through the concentration of a SCAD presence. So, David,
hey John,
Aaron, what do you got? What are you thinking?
Well, so when you say the displacement on the gentrification, that doesn't solely rest on SCAD's shoulders. SCAD is part of that. I can honestly say that. But that's
Fair
not
enough.
only SCAD, and that's been happening throughout our community. And so I think that is indicative of a larger conversation that needs to be had in a lot of avenues, especially when we talk about area planning, neighborhood planning, and so on and so forth. Because ultimately what it seems is that in a lot of cases, that community who is being displaced, their voice may not be heard or valued in these discussions before zoning is changing and so on and so forth. So, with that, SCAD is not the only entity that's responsible for this. in a lot of ways ourselves as elected officials in some way or another, perhaps, respectfully, our planning, representatives throughout our community are part of that. Because again, if we're not engaging the community before we go in and change the zoning and stuff like that, yeah, we put up a sign and all that good stuff, and we meet all the criteria that the policy says, but in reality, we all know that that's not necessarily an effective way to engage the community. So I'd be willing to bet that in a lot of cases where some of these buildings are, that the community would have been against it. And I'd be willing to bet, having not looked into it at great length, I'd be willing to bet that there have been instances where the community has spoken against it. However, the decision was made to allow a zoning change or a variance or a text amendment of some sort to allow things like this to take place. I'd be willing to bet that that's happened before without the community's word being respected in that.
Your point is heard and well taken, and I apologize. I did not want to infer that SCAD was the sole fulcrum point for this cultural and gentrification going on in these neighborhoods. I do think it is one of the larger forces at play in that dynamic. So I appreciate the clarification, Adot. David, any thoughts? Gentrification?
The West Victory project was rather large in an area that I at the time when it was being maybe even the infancy of it, was an area of town that I frequented right across the street at an establishment. And I would love to know how many businesses are no longer paying taxes because they're no longer there on that corner lot. I definitely frequented. I went to that liquor store on that corner across from the McDonald's because there was a climbing gym across the street that's no longer there. Rent went up, which pushed out even things that you can't even see the trickle down. But those were businesses that were for profit and were paying taxes. I know that there was an auto body shop as well right behind that place that is no longer there as well. So it's I'm not going to say that it's all. Just like Adot made great point, it's not just SCAD, and that's not the conversation we're having here tonight. But the businesses do get moved, they get closed, and those are taxpayers.
Yeah. Well, in my chucklehead, the pilot program is a bit of a salve for the effects that are caused, not only the consumption of services, but the neighborhood, community, cultural effects, to whatever extent an entity is responsible for them. This is a way to kind of level the playing field and make up for those effects. So this is a commenter who posted. I thought it was worthy of our discussion. Here's my view as a lawyer. Our proposal states that the stated here requires the voluntary cooperation of SCAD. That immediately puts the city and Chatham County into an inferior bargaining position, coming with their hats in their hands, as always. This situation hasn't improved much and has always been on the agenda. Since I moved here 8 years ago, each successive city manager says, we'll look into it.
I'd like to comment on that. Just it is a voluntary cooperation. It is across the country.
Yeah.
The slide that Chuck put up earlier with all of those institutions that we laud across the country, they voluntarily entered into this over a decade ago.
Yeah.
And are paying large sums of money to the communities that they're a part of because they voluntarily want to support that community more than they are currently. And that's that when I look at it, that's how I see it, as come to the table, be a larger supporter of your community and help make an impact, in my view, for the children of the K-12 public school system, but then for Alderwoman Gibson-Carter and for Commissioner Whiteley, help make the city and the county better for all of its citizens, which include the faculty, staff, and students of SCAD.
Yeah, at 74 cents a day, it goes a long way. And as the mayor said in his State of the Union, address. These are valued community partners. So interestingly, Chuck had pointed out that list that we just showed of college institutions who are paying pilot fees, for the last 10 or 12 years, they are the, Harvard, Yale, Princeton. They are the, highest end of the academic world, and they're world class. And SCAD presents itself as, world class, top of the charts in the art educational arena. So it's just a little continuity going on there. Is Kesha with us, and can we see her?
Yeah, I think I don't think she's in a place to do video, but I know that she's here on audio. Alderwoman Gibson-Carter, we want to welcome you back to the Better Savannah podcast. We appreciate you taking some time out of a busy schedule before the holidays. As we led this discussion up to when you came in, we just started, with this fact sheet that I've got up here in the big screen. And this is our proposal, 74 cents a day from each student, based out of a $67 a quarter fee for all SCAD students that they can either charge their students or pay for them. And the revenue sharing formula, we decided to take a shot at it kind of based on what the county M&O, the school board M&O, and the city M&O tax rates are. And we came up with this number kind of based on what is the gap between what SCAD provides in positive externalities and the funding needed to mitigate the negative externalities. So, we obviously kind of got this because this is something that's been discussed by other members of your council, by you for a long time. The mayor has signaled that this is something he's working on as well. So we wanted to have members of all the governmental bodies that should be at the table for this discussion. Your thoughts in general, Kesha?
Well, while we're waiting for Kesha to connect audio-wise, let me quote my good late friend Joe Murray Rivers, who I served on the county commission with. And Joe always made it a point when we were doing budgets. He wanted to know, is this recurring revenue or not? And this is potentially recurring revenue. This is not a one-off thing. This is a small but valuable continuing stream of revenue, whether the city wants to hire more police or the schools want to do teacher salary improvement, or the county wants more mosquito control or library functions. It's M&O recurring revenue. And Joe Murray Rivers always made it a point to point out that this is the important revenue. The one-time infusions are great, but they're just that. They're one-time things. So having said that, where do we go from here, guys? Do Adot, David, do you have any thoughts about how do we pursue this? How do we make this global and not just limited to the city of Savannah? How do we make it happen?
Well, I think first and foremost, it starts with, again, getting to the table. When we're talking about these things from the outside, it's important to have these kind of conversations. I would have liked to have maybe had a rep from SCAD on here to kind of hear their stance and whatnot. But of course, perhaps it's not the forum to actually get into the nuts and bolts of that conversation, maybe not in a public forum. But, I think it's important to have those conversations. Somebody's got to reach out, call the meeting. Let's make it happen. Let's not just talk about it theoretically or conceptually. Let's actually make it happen. Another thing I want to say, though, is I agree that we are in a need of more recurring revenue sources, revenue streams, alternative revenue streams. I know as it relates to the county, The vast majority of our revenue comes from property taxes. And so I'm, searching for any way that we could find recurring revenue, because again, the last thing I want to do is increase property taxes, which ultimately increases rents. It increases a lot of things. So I think it is important to have this conversation. I think the biggest part of it, though, is we have to make sure that, just like was stated earlier, unfortunately, we have to come in the hat in hand position, so to speak. But the truth is, we had a little bit more leverage than we may assume we have now, prior to zoning changes or any allotments or changes that were allowed, allowances, that were made to allow SCAD to build and expand their footprint as they have in certain areas.
Yeah. Listen, I understand Kesha is at least connected with audio now. Alderwoman at large, Carter, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Hello, Savannah, and hello, Better Savannah. Thank you for
Hello.
hosting and giving life and voice to this issue that is pressing.
Excellent. Well, we're delighted to
very
have you
relevant
with
in
us.
the time that we are living in. And I see you all. Yes. Listen, I could hear you all very well, and I saw the presentation of Chuck's slides. Thank you again for this invitation. We are happy to see the work that you all have done. I think the presentation provides a novel way for us to start looking at closing the gap that exists where the notion or the idea of a pilot is concerned. In 2019, the electorate signaled that there was time out for status quo, no more business as usual. And so I regret that our business community, SCAD, the ports, our tourism industry, I regret that they have not fallen in line with what the electorate of Savannah says they want. And where this pilot is concerned, just like for container fees with the port, I'm not so married to creating policies and being hard-nosed where this issue is concerned with generating revenue from these sources, as I am inclined to embrace opportunity they present and coming to the table. For decades now, the winners have taken all and they have shared very little. And all we are saying, don't push us, don't make us have to be hard and fast where these policies are concerned. But because there isn't any middle of the road opportunities, because
I think we've lost Kesha for a moment, but Kesha, can you hear us uninterrupted?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, you had
I can
some.
hear you fine. Am I going in and
you're
out?
going in. You're going in and out. I take it you're transiting someplace, so maybe that'll improve. Stay with us, and let me parenthetically add something. About 6 months ago, Chuck and I got a call from SCAD, okay, and they wanted to meet with us. And this was when the Chatham Apartments story broke, that in fact the 234 apartments were going to be, the leases were going to be terminated and the people would have to move out. And we learned that SCAD was now acquiring it once all those people had been displaced. So they wanted to meet with us and talk about, our relationship and the community. And we were very enthusiastic, and we had a Zoom meeting with them. And I'll be honest with you, it was more along the lines of look at all the programs that we do with SCAD Cares or Savannah Cares, that makes us a reliable community partner. And we were a little surprised that they brought nothing new to it other than their pre-existing community high-profile things like SCAD cares, and they were going to increase the volunteer hours to the city of Savannah. Don't get me wrong, that's all welcome and necessary and good, and we appreciated that. But there was no room, at least 6 months ago, to expand this with a pilot program or anything else. So I'm glad the mayor is making some inroads. My concern is thus far it seems that it's only a city of Savannah negotiation or focus, and we think that needs to be broad based. Anyway, you guys, you have any thoughts on how to kick this off? I love Aaron's suggestion that it just takes, a step forward, a first step, an exploratory meeting with SCAD to make certain that the schools and the counties included. Jump ball. Anybody got any thoughts?
I think by bringing us as just representatives, and again, as Commissioner Whiteley said earlier, we don't speak on behalf of our larger bodies. We're just here as our own entity. But this definitely brings it to the forefront for me to have a discussion with my other 8 board members, and a discussion with the superintendent to say, hey, what are your thoughts on this? Because I could be out on an island on my own, and I would sit on that island and still talk to SCAD and say, hey, you could better your community even more. Like you said, John, like you said, they said, well, we're doing some great things. I'm like, that's wonderful. Let's do some more great things.
Yeah.
We're doing some good things doesn't mean we should just stop. I've done 8 good things, so I don't need to do 10.
Yeah.
So I think this is definitely, I'm glad I got a laugh there. I just think this is the beginning of a conversation.
Yeah. Before we
I hope that they reach back out to you.
Okay, before we go to Adot, I hear you that you're only speaking for you in your seat and not your board, but I like the idea of your board possibly considering getting included in these conversations that the mayor is having with SCAD. Adot?
Yeah, so I will say that I wasn't aware of the conversations that the mayor had been having those conversations directly. And I'm not sure if the county is involved in any of those. To my knowledge, we're not. But I think we should be, as one of the 3 taxing entities that are affected by this. So again, I think I'll go out on a limb and make an assumption. I think it's safe to say that my colleagues would definitely be willing to consider it. Again, anytime that we can find alternative revenue sources that are going to help us serve the citizens of Chatham County better, I think we're always all ears. But again, John, I just think it's and pardon me for saying this, y'all, and with all due respect to everybody's listening, it's just cut the bullshit and let's have the conversations.
Adot, I'm sorry to interrupt you, Adot, but could you, Dr. Bringman detailed out for us kind of where $1 million could go to in a couple of different examples. Could you detail out for our listeners and viewers the services the county already provides to residents and students inside the city? You guys just had a big budget issue 6 months ago, 5 months ago. A lot of it was around $400,000 for the district attorney's office to clear backlog cases out of the jail. That's something that everybody benefits from. Could you talk a little bit to the general M&O budget that benefits everybody?
Yeah. So, I mean, when we think about where money like this can be spent, looks what, $700 and something thousand that would go to the county. That's salary for code enforcement officers. When we think about, that's more so for the unincorporated area. Animal control and animal services, where I think would be very welcome. As some may know, we've had discussions about the differences in enforcement needs for City of Savannah being as densely populated as it is versus unincorporated Chatham. But nonetheless, Chatham County holds that ball. Another place where that'd be very welcome, where I could see some potential salary increases or new positions would be 911. Right now, that's another thing that Chatham County is responsible for, the 911 services. So that's another area. SEMA. There's plenty of areas. And again, with a number like that, that's a few full-time positions. Maybe that's funding, helping to fund recreation in some sort of way to make sure that more kids are engaged. It's just a matter of, again, looking at the different options. Any type of infusion we'll find somewhere to put it. We would definitely find somewhere to put it.
Gotcha. Just for fun, Chuck, can you put up slide 7? This was a comment, a little radical, in my opinion, but it gives you a good feeling for how the community views the situation, not us as policy wonks, but just, people out there. SCAD definitely should be providing full 4-year scholarships to students who reside in the neighborhoods they have intruded in and are trying to destroy. That's approximately $240,000 per student. Divide that number into how much taxes they don't pay.
I don't think that's radical. Truth be told, I think that's an easy out.
Well, that would be one way of curing the problem and adding to solutions. But there's a thought. I mean, how many of the displaced kids coming out of high school could SCAD possibly give scholarships to offset for that whole displacement and cultural shift? I called it radical. Maybe it isn't.
Dr. Bringman, could you address this question from one of the viewers? Again, SCAD's largest portion of a tax bill they're not paying because of their nonprofit status would go to the school system. We talked a little bit about this, about the connection between educational outcomes, class sizes, and the long-range poverty and crime issues in our community. Do you want to take a stab at this question?
Yeah, so I'm guessing he's seen it through one of the lenses that I first saw it as, that a typical SCAD student probably isn't having a massive impact on our school system, but SCAD as an entity can pay into our school budget to make every child's life and education better, which then creates an upward trickle effect of empowerment for those children, lower poverty rate, higher minimum wage for them. Higher living wage for them as they grow up, which then benefits our community as well. So I think that's where you're going back again, Chuck. But I was trying to read his question and still wasn't really getting the layers out there. So,
yeah. Hello.
Are they pay for this stress? I'm not understanding.
Yeah, I think the gist of the questioner is that, we're saying that SCAD is have some negative externalities, and we're asking the students or the school to pay to help mitigate those negative externalities. And I guess the commenter is saying that there's really no negative externalities for the school board. Right.
And probably not a direct negative per se, but that doesn't mean that they shouldn't have a positive role or take a more positive role.
So when the rent goes up, and then the kids have less, support at home because the parents are working a third job, right? That kid shows up to your school system less prepared to learn, right? I think that's kind of the connecting the bigger picture for that question.
And again, I know that your 74 cents a day has it, again, this is just a plan, has it as $67 a student per quarter. And as I stated almost right off the bat when I was just talking with you, is like, that doesn't have to be paid by the student. That can be paid by the school off the top of the $100+ million a year that they make as profit. So it doesn't have to be an expense that is pushed back down to the student.
Alderwoman Gibson-Carter, when people think about SCAD and its impact, the city of Savannah is first top of mind, especially with police and fire resources. We went through a fire tax debacle a few years back. What are your expanded thoughts?
I want to say, I don't know if you heard me earlier, but I think all of the ideas and the recommendations you have by the examples you provided in your presentation are all novel ways that we can look at closing the gap. But while we are spinning our wheels, I will concur with Commissioner Adot. We just have to get it done. We oftentimes take incremental approaches to everything related to our vulnerable communities, and we take incremental approaches to changing things when it comes to holding our big businesses and the winners accountable. For me, we know what the data says. We know what the statistics are, and we know how the resources a pilot can bring, how much resource a pilot can bring will make a difference to our community's bottom line with regard to health and safety of our citizens. If we look at tackling the most the gravest issue that is plaguing our community right now is gun violence. We know that bullets do not have names. We know that African American men are dying on the street of Savannah at alarming rates, way too many. And very, very little is done about it. The port, if the giants like our tourism community, if they don't see this as an issue and recognize that they are uniquely poised to make a major difference in the lives of the citizens of our community, I am not.
That's a shame that we're
or connecting with. I have no idea about what those plans are. If you go back to the very first city council workshop, our very first city council workshop in 2019, you will hear me say, this is not what the electorate voted for in 2019. They sent a resounding indictment on the entire council because of reasons just accountable who can make a difference in our community. And the fact of the matter is, we are not asking for a handout. We're not even of the taxpayers in our community. Right now, the average property taxpayer pay way more in property tax than SCAD. And you know how much SCAD pays? Nothing.
Yeah.
And so how fair is that for us as elected officials to sit back and rest on our relationships, our friendships, and our kinships with these individuals, with these executives, with the president, and not hold them accountable? And so we can go around and around the bend on this, but we just really have to get it done. And right now, we do not have the political will. Basically, what you all have heard from City Hall is banter and lip service. And like much of what we haven't done by way of policy presentation, implementation, and adoption, nothing is happening. And so unless
let me
you have a leader who is willing to tackle these big issues and have these.
Alderman Carter, you're breaking up too much for us right now in terms of your audio. So I think we got the gist of what you were trying to say, though, John. Did you?
I want to make a point that's optimistic. And I've now heard the city's budget presentation 3 times. I heard an overview at the Downtown Neighborhood Association meeting earlier this week. I've watched the workshop on the budget, and I've seen the mayor's press conference. The new city manager, Jay Melder, is really calling this new budget for next year back to basics. Okay, there isn't the prior administration's focus on beefing up the tourism industry or the canal district. This is nuts and bolts. We're going to get it right. We're going to beef up our sanitation department. We're going to beef up our recycling. We're going to look at modernizing our water meter systems so that they don't have to be read manually. Anyway, back to basics. Great concept. This pilot program with SCAD, if it extended across all local governments, fits perfectly in the back to basics motif that we're not looking for, exorbitant and far out funding issues. Now we're looking more inward at our core responsibilities: public safety, sanitation, parks and recreation, streets, potholes, lanes. So this is a good time, I think, for the pilot program discussion with SCAD to help us do an even better job of getting back to basics. I think it just fits on a temporal basis with the message that we're currently getting from the new city manager, which I like a lot. So, gentlemen, I don't know how to wrap this up except to say I greatly appreciate your willingness to come on and conceptualize the idea, add to it, help us understand it better. And it's my hope that maybe as elected officials, you'll go back to your respective bodies and start a conversation with your colleagues, as Aaron suggested and as David has suggested, that would formalize the ability for your governments and your sphere of responsibility to be at that table in those discussions, so that whatever comes out of this is community wide and not City of Savannah focused. So
thank you, John, and thank you, Chuck, for what you do for the community, and thank you for inviting me. Starting this conversation a long time ago, but allowing me to be a part of it this evening. Like I said earlier, I will definitely have a conversation with my board, but I would love to sit at a table or on a Zoom meeting if it has to be, with SCAD representatives to see how we can better the lives of all of our community through education, but also both city and county offerings as well.
Thank you.
Hey, and John, I just want to say to you and Chuck, I appreciate you guys' approach of not just highlighting issues, but coming with solutions.
Thank you.
I think that is something that is definitely underappreciated. And so I really applaud that. And thank you for having me on as well. I appreciate the opportunity to share some time with my colleagues and Alderwoman Gibson-Carter, as well as Dr. Bringman. And, I will pledge to bring this back to my colleagues at the commission so we could potentially have a talk also and kind of get the ball rolling. As Alderwoman Gibson-Carter said, we do have to have the political will to do some of these things. And, I can speak for myself in saying that the political will is here for myself. And I'm hopeful that it will be there for my colleagues.
For all of you, would you be willing to work together with this group of people here, your counterpart in the 6th District, Commissioner Whiteley,
John, Chuck,
to
can
bring
you hear
in
me?
and yeah.
I just want to say in closing, we are continuously grateful for the investment of Better Savannah into our community by way of your presentations, in addition to helping us educate the community, because it's through this information and education and platforms like this that people will become plugged in decisions related to their thoughts on what's happening and not happening in our local government. But again, at the end of the day, we have to recognize that communities like Eastern Wharf was planned. The corridor of SCAD, of Victory Drive and 37th Street, where SCAD now is, it was planned. Chatham Apartments, the takeover was planned. The fact that the Salvation Army is moving off of Montgomery Street in the corridor that SCAD is taking over is planned. And as expeditiously as those plans happen, we can plan those decisions and policies that are closer related to pilots that will bring in the resources we so desperately need to undergird the resources of our police department, our fire department, increase recreation. And I always have to put a plug in for my work with regard to sexual violence in our community. 60% of our cases of rape involve students. In the last year, I was at the Rape Crisis Center. Of those students, a great majority of them were SCAD students. And so when you just look at that, the magnitude of that crime alone, we can't negate how many other crimes our police department are responding to with our students. And we want to continue those very, very valuable and important services. But at the end of the day, we also have to recognize the greater responsibility that university has to the city of Savannah. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Alderwoman Carter. Chuck, you have any?
Well, I thought that was a really interesting point brought up by Alderwoman Carter. I just want to say I got, my shirt on to support that movement. Obviously, one thing is that is an issue that is both county and city, because you got the city resources with the police, but then the county resources with the district attorney's office that is ultimately, hopefully, going to prosecute those crimes. This is why we think it's a unilateral, a bilateral, trilateral kind of approach here with all of these groups represented from the county, the school board, and the city. And my hope is that, because I'm very much sure SCAD executives will see this. Todd's got another good quote saying how many people at SCAD need to sign off on paying these, (1), ? That's probably true. And so, when we see the results of an editorial post like we had this week, where thousands and thousands of people are viewing and reading and sharing
and agreeing,
I would like to see, this group of forward-thinking elected officials, become a working group for this type of policy to get hammered out. These numbers it doesn't have to be what we're proposing. This is just our idea for what we think is fair based on the positive externalities SCAD brings to us. But this number of revenue represents the gap to deal with the negative externalities, to mitigate those negative externalities brought about by the hyper growth. I also just want to bring up one more point about diminishing returns. The status quo agreement with SCAD made perfect sense in 1978. Made perfect sense in 1988, 98, probably even in 2008 with the Great Recession, probably still made sense. But in the last 5 years, particularly since, I think, when they bought the Chatham Apartments, I think people recognize that they have hit their point of diminishing returns, and that their growth from here on out doesn't really bring any more value than they already can already. If anybody wants to push back or expound on that piece, we can kind of close out on that. But that was just the last piece I wanted to share, John.
Okay. Well, thanks. Gentlemen, again, Better Savannah is here, focused on policy. We are at your disposal. Anything we can do to further your conversations and your exploration into this to build a better community and a fairer community, we commit to that. But we'll leave it in your capable hands. If you like what you've heard, it sounds like you're going to talk to your colleagues. Keep us informed on how it goes. And again, we're here to support you.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, gentlemen.
Thank you.
And definitely looking forward to more conversations like this.
Great. Well, enjoy your evenings or games or whatever's ahead of you. And we sure look forward to seeing you the next time on Better Savannah.
Thank you again for the invite.
All right.
Thank
Have
you.
a good one.
You're welcome. Thanks, everybody. Let's hope those Falcons cover the spread, David.
coalition with our community partners who currently don't pay property taxes to share in the continued vitality of our city by making payments in lieu of taxes. Stay tuned about the outcome of those discussions.